I have the reputation of being the biggest racist in the country. Think of that. Well, I hate to, what are you clapping for, that I am or I'm not? Well, I'm not. I know you guys and gals aren't either. You're just trying to do the right thing for our country.
This is I Don't Speak German. I'm Jack Graham, he, him, and in this podcast I talk to my friend Daniel Harper, also he, him, who spent years tracking the far right in their safe spaces. In this show we talk about them and about the wider reactionary forces feeding them and feeding off them. Be warned, this is difficult subject matter. Content warnings always apply. Hello, and yes, we're back for episode 104. I Don't Speak German, episode 104. Amazing. And we need to, well, first of all, what we need to do is say hello. I'm Jack Graham, and who's this other guy here? Hello, speak.
I'm Daniel Harper, and I'm here.
Yeah, there you go. That's the sort of, there you go, professionalism for you, podcast professionalism. And then what we do is we apologize for only getting one episode out in February. Sorry about that, guy, because we're recording this from my point of view in the very, very nearly the 28th of February. Not quite, but nearly. So the chances of me getting this edited and up tomorrow are zero. So basically, it's a done thing as far as I'm concerned, that there's only one episode for February, which is not good. And we apologize for that. Various things. Largely the fact that owing to Storm Eunice hitting the United Kingdom, specifically very hard, specifically hitting the bit of the United Kingdom that I live in, and hitting me personally quite badly, actually. And
don't dox yourself.
Electrical power for several days.
Right. Yes.
So incommunicado and unable to edit podcasts or anything. So I was certainly unable to record them because they're quite electricity dependent podcasts, I've found. So yeah, only one episode in February, sadly, which is less than we like to do. But we got one episode and a bonus out, but that's all. So sorry about that, and we'll do better. We'll try to compensate you.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get this one out in the first few days of March, and then hopefully we will. I've got several like halfway through prep. So hypothetically, as long as we can get to record and we don't have any more like serious personal issues, which happened to both of us this month of February. I didn't have a power outage, but I had other things kind of happening. But hypothetically, we should be able to get like an extra episode out next month, and we try to keep that in mind because we do want to kind of keep the progress consistent, and we just appreciate your support.
We do indeed, and your forbearance. And the other thing is to we're not going to talk about it because it's a gigantic subject all to itself, and B, it's not really our remit. But I think we need to acknowledge the vast world events going on, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And really, I think that's all we're going to say about it. We're just going to acknowledge it because it would feel wrong not to.
Obviously, we support the rights of working people to not be annihilated by military machines of any kind. And that goes for whatever nationality they happen to be in. So
I'm against imperialism, Yeah. So there it is. That's it. That's my position.
Right.
Sorry.
Controversial stance. Anyway. So that's about all we're going to say here. But we did want to acknowledge it and just kind of move past it. And we'll probably end up having to talk about it in a future episode as we just talk about how these dipshits are referring to it. But it's a little bit too close right now to really do anything on for me because there's so much misinformation and so much the narratives are still like solidifying. So
yes. And if you want to listen to podcasts on that subject, I think there might be one or two. So,
I think there might be a few people talking about this, like my entire Twitter feed for the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But we just gesture to it because obviously it's a horrific thing that's happening and it's very important. So we kind of just we couldn't just not talk about it, if you know what I mean. So now we have talked about it.
Sure.
On to the meat and drink of episode 104. So Daniel, tell us what we're going to be talking about this time.
Well, I promised Patriot Front in standard Daniel Harper fashion. Whenever I talk about, whenever I say this is what we're doing next time, it is never actually the thing we do next time.
No.
And I promise that's not a bit. I was totally planning to do the Patriot Front episode, and then it kind of fell up as the research went. It kind of started to fall apart on me, and I've got other stuff I need to do to kind of prep that. So after this episode, we're going to be starting kind of an extended series about the National Justice Party and TRS and the kind of extended network of which I would argue Patriot Front is now like fully ensconced within. But we kind of have to do the background work on the NJP before we can really get to talk seriously about Patriot Front. So, and then as I was trying to figure out what fucking episode I was going to prep, suddenly Nick Fuentes' little torpy face showed up and made some news because the America First Political Action Conference 3, the third one of these, happened on Friday. We're recording this on a Sunday. It happened on Friday. And I said, oh, look at that. Look, news. We could just cover the news. That would be something we can do. And oh boy, that meant listening to about 4.5 hours at regular speed of these people talk. And it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. And we're going to get into that. So that's what we're talking about this time.
Okay. Yeah. AFPAC, American. What is it? It's America First. Political
Action Conference, right? So it's the sort of the dark twisted mirror version of CPAC. So
as if CPAC wasn't bad enough, you know.
Oh, we're gonna get to this. Don't worry.
Really.
Yeah. So
this is the bad version of CPAC, if you can imagine such a thing.
It's like you get to the mirror universe and the people with goatees have goatees on the goatees. Like that's that's how you know.
Well, it's the mirror universe that the people in the mirror universe go to, isn't it? It's not our universe. It's an even worse one. You know?
Even worse one, right? There's the Community Darkest Timeline joke, but let's just move on. We have a lot of audio to get to today.
Yeah.
As you heard in our cold open there, that was Joe Arpaio, the quote-unquote toughest sheriff in America in Maricopa County, Arizona, who got cited in contempt of court, who had a bunch of lawsuits put against him. Deeply, deeply horrible human being who has been a CPAC stalwart for years. He attended this year's CPAC but did not speak. He did speak at the America First Political Action Conference. And I think the thing that's interesting to me and why I made that clip the cold open was Joe Arpaio is standing on the stage and says, "They call me the most racist person in America," and gets applauded by the white nationalists, open race realists, open racists. And he's confused because he's used to the more coded racism and we're not racist, we're just working for what's good for our country sort of thing, you know. And so there's a tension here which goes through this entire conference, and I think this demonstrates the strangeness of where kind of the far right is right now. It's something that we've been talking about a lot with Elijah Schaefer and the You Are Here podcast, and sort of that extended universe is, there's a line. You're not allowed to go over that line and maintain your access to kind of like the big conservative donors, the big conservative, the moneyman, the warm embrace of being able to do this professionally and not, record out of your mother's basement. Nick Fuentes somehow has millions of dollars to throw around. We know that there have been like kind of secret funders of Nick Fuentes, and we know, we discussed with David Gerard, a Bitcoin donation of several $1 million that he got at some point. And I guarantee you there's other kind of white nationalist money kind of floating around at this thing. But it's not within the warm embrace of Conservatism Inc. And so AFPAC has to pose itself as we are the anti-CPAC, that CPAC is, the cucked version of what we're trying to do. And they are not really about putting America first, even though they are kind of branding themselves this way. And so this is a moment in which we are seeing a sort of like aggressive, like an infighting war between like various different factions that nonetheless all have a sort of like some sort of political legitimacy, because CPAC used to be the place where the fringe went, right? It used to be sort of the fringy conference as opposed to the sort of more like the regular sort of RNC stuff. Well, now CPAC looks like the base of the party. Like these are the normies, and AFPAC is kind of out there being the more aggressive, the more openly racist part, kind of wing of the party. And then you've got people like the National Justice Party who are like out, rejecting the party politics whatsoever and being the even more hardcore version of AFPAC. And so these people are all fighting. And I think, again, what I want to demonstrate by playing some clips today is to sort of like indicate exactly what AFPAC is trying to do and where I think what this all means sort of for, kind of the right wing in the future. And I think there's no better way to demonstrate this other than like Arpaio wondering if he's supposed to think it's good or not that they are applauding him for being racist. Marjorie Taylor Greene was a kind of last minute addition to this process. She was not on any of the posters. She was not advertised ahead of time. Apparently, one of the big guys who was sort of like the head of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, had to drop out of the conference at the last minute, and they somehow got MTG to be involved in it. Apparently, Milo Yiannopoulos, who attended AFPAC but did not speak, was one of the people who arranged this. And so all the people
Milo has pull with Marjorie.
Apparently, so this is all like claimed on stage. So who knows kind of what the reality is. But Milo was on the poster. Milo is on. Hold on, let me check and make sure. Yes, Milo is on the poster. Like he apparently attended the conference but did not speak. Right. Other people who were on there: Gavin McInnes, Jared Taylor of American Renaissance, Peter Bremelo of VDARE, John Doyle, one of the best friends of Elijah Schaffer, sitting right there. Laura Loomer, Baked Alaska. These are just a handful of the ones that would be kind of easily identifiable. So this Groyper movement, this America First Nick Fuentes movement, is larger than sort of an explicit white nationalist thing. They're trying to, I would argue, disguise the sort of open white nationalism and the open anti-Semitism within this sort of like larger fringe internet-based right-wing subculture, right? They're trying to sort of embrace some of the QAnon stuff. They're embracing some of the like kind of fringier people within the Republican Party, but they're trying to get people who are elected representatives who have in some cases been elected on the strength of being of saying, not saying the quiet part loud in terms of their racism, as being sort of part of this existing thing, right? So they get Marjorie Taylor Greene to show up and give what's a really standard Marjorie Taylor Greene speech. But there is one, I think, and this is my next clip. I want to play kind of her opening here. This is how she starts with this, and I think it's worth just kind of listening to. There's a certain theme going on here.
Well, hello, canceled Americans. I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight, and I'll tell you why. I think I need to talk to you about who I am and what I see as the future for our country and the future for all of you. You see, you might know me as a member of Congress, but you need to know me a little bit better. My name is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I am the daughter of the King, the one true living God, the Alpha, the Omega, our Father in heaven, and I am a forgiven sinner, washed in the blood of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Praise God. Amen. Christ is King. Now, we are the fortunate ones to be born as Americans, but we have a serious issue going forward, ladies and gentlemen. You see, it's my parents' generation, it's my generation that has failed this youth generation. The generation of my children are 18, 22, and 24 years old, and I am so afraid for their future. I'm afraid for your future. You see, you've been handed something you shouldn't have been handed. You've been handed the responsibility to stand up and fight for our Constitution and stand for our freedoms and stop the Democrats, who are the Communist Party of the United States of America. But even more so, if you're a Christian, you've been called to something bigger. And this is what I want to talk to you about today.
Lots of stuff there.
Yeah.
The Democrats are the Communist Party of the USA.
Yeah.
But that's like standard rhetoric among the Republican Party these days. You know, like
yeah,
it
that's
is,
right, yeah.
And it has been for a long time, to be clear. I do, and this is just a bash the libs moment, or the 2020 primaries are still in my head here. But you remember when it was like Biden was going to get stuff done and work with the Republicans, and he's going to be the moderate that they'll respect. And then like 10 minutes after he was inaugurated, they suddenly started calling him a communist. That was always going to happen. It was obvious that was always going to happen. It's exactly what happened. And they are literally calling Biden like an authoritarian communist who is going to take your freedoms away because of like basic public health things under a once in a century pandemic. So, that was always going to happen. And that's exactly what's happening. And even like the moderate right spaces, it's just the thing. The other thing that I think is really essential here is this like Christ is King mantra.
Yeah.
Several people at this speakers at this conference use this, and the audience is primed to chant it. What this does is it distracts from some of the characteristics of the alt-right, of the kind of 2016, 2014 to 2017 alt-right, because that was almost explicitly an atheist movement. I mean, it wasn't really, but a lot of the major figures, Richard Spencer, Mike Enoch, Christopher Cantwell, et cetera, were and are outspoken atheists. This is, a kind of an evolution from that, and it is an attempt to be embraced by the sort of old school religious right, Christian nationalist right, which is having a resurgence, especially within the Deep South. And this plugs into the stuff that we were talking about in the last episode about the degeneracy of books and the sexualization of children and all this kind of thing. And we need to get back to biblical standards, et cetera, et cetera.
Biblical standards and not the sexualization of children. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I'm using this in like heavy air quotes in the way that fundamentalists would use it. What I think is worth noting there is that Fuentes has always kind of been he's kind of called himself a traditional Catholic. He's kind of brought on this like trad cath kind of idea, but he's never you never get him sort of getting into like the details of theology. He never really talks about this stuff. He doesn't quote the Bible. He doesn't quote the Vatican. He's a very kind of political actor who sort of almost puts on this kind of trad cath clothing as I don't want to say an affectation. I believe he believes it, but like he's not deriving his sort of like political ideology from that place. It's coming from this more explicitly kind of white nationalist space, right? And the reason that that's significant is that while Catholics have obviously had a strong place in American politics for a century and a half at least, they were never really quite as much a part of the religious right, which is almost explicitly a Protestant and even like a Southern Baptist, almost explicitly Southern Baptist kind of movement. There's not a evangelical, and again in kind of heavy air quotes there. it's, there's not a strong Catholic element in the American South, for instance, which is where, kind of those religious values were kind of have their strength, at least their political strength. So this is, and there has been a long sort of like a desire to kind of take the more right-wing kind of sections of Catholics, more politically engaged Catholics, and to kind of merge them into that coalition. And that's not new with Nick Fuentes, and it's not new with this movement, but it is something that's at least notable to kind of put your finger on, is that these guys do sort of frame themselves often through a Catholic lens as opposed to a Protestant lens. The Christ is King thing, also like framing themselves as kind of explicitly Christian and like overwhelmingly Christian in their outlook, really allows them to talk about Jews in a different way. Because while the Kevin McDonalds and the Mike Enochs of the world believe that, Judaism is sustained because of its, because of the genetic factors of like how Jews, evolved as, a separate species from white people, et cetera, et cetera. And, the kind of softer version of that is more like a kind of cultural argument. They're making a fairly explicit religious argument against Judaism, which allows them to cast their anti-Semitism as a love for like Bible and a love for their faith and a love for like Christian values, quote unquote, rather than what it really is, which is really openly racist anti-Semitism that has nothing to do with these kinds of religious values. That, I think, is something that is there's been a lot of reporting about this movement. That's something that I think has not been well covered here, right?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Marjorie Taylor Greene's words there, very, very Protestant evangelical,
right?
But in the context of this Nick Fuentes organized event, so yeah, you can see that there's an attempt being made to reach across that divide. It's very interesting to see at this stage, an attempt by pretty much an open anti-Semitic Nazi Nick Fuentes to from a tradcath perspective to reach across to that vast untapped well of authoritarian right-wing potential in the United States that is the largely Protestant evangelical far-right Christian contingent.
Exactly. And so this is again sort of Nick Fuentes triangulating, right? This is Nick Fuentes.
That's the word.
His plan. What he's trying to do is to sort of like bring all these people together and to create this sort of like this melange of, vaguely of far right people who have sort of similar enemies, but who don't necessarily share the same language, and they're not necessarily using words in exactly the same way, and there are kind of different kinds of aspects of it. But it also provides a smokescreen for the more explicitly white nationalist, more explicitly racist, more explicitly anti-Semitic parts of it, because you can kind of point to some of the other speakers, and you can point to some of the other people and kind of say, well, no, we're a Christian group, or we're a traditional group. We believe in standard Republican things, like all Democrats are communists. Like that's clearly, that's mainstream, there's
an obvious point we can all agree on,
Right. No, obviously. And so, one of the things that people are talking about here is the kind of the presence of multiple elected or formerly elected Republican representatives and other office holders who attended this event. Now, again, Peter Brimelow and Jared Taylor were in the audience for this. I'm going to play later. Nick Fuentes praised Jared Taylor from the stage at the end of the event. Everybody knows that he's there. They're making explicit kind of things here. Now, most of the people who are actually elected representatives did not actually attend the event. They sent in video clips, like pre-recorded clips, because they didn't want to actually show up at the thing. But Marjorie Taylor Greene did. She also attended CPAC the next morning. So she shows up at AFPAC. She goes off. She claims she had to get to an airport and then, kind of either came back. I'm unclear on some of the details of exactly. I think she was claiming I have to get to the airport after her CPAC appearance, because she actually spoke at both conferences, which she's unique in that. Although Arpaio attended CPAC, he did not speak at CPAC. So overnight after MTG's AFPAC appearance, it becomes public, and there's video of it. I put a link to the whole 5.5-hour live stream if you would like to sit and watch it. She was asked by a journalist about her affiliation with Nick Fuentes. So let's just jump ahead to the next day, and I'm just going to play this. There's a tweet of this. There's a little bit longer clip, but I kind of clipped about a minute of this out. So check this out.
Through strength. So this is something that we've got to really focus on. I'm appalled at our country for putting America last this way, making us depend on China, Russia, and foreign countries for our critical supplies and our energy.
Do you endorse Nick Fuentes' views?
Excuse me. I don't know what his views are. I've never...
He's a white nationalist.
I do not endorse those views. The reason why I went was to talk to the audience, just like I've talked to many different audiences. I've talked to Democrat union workers earlier this week. I've talked here at CPAC. I talked to his people who were there. It wasn't an alignment. It was to talk about getting everyone together to save our country. And I think that's what...
Could I ask, why did you take the stage, though?
An appearance is an endorsement.
Young white men with the secret sauce.
And she did say in her speech, young white men are the secret sauce of this movement. Now.
Always the same shit.
Yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene also did like a 3-part Twitter thing in which she was talking about, no, I just believe in sort of the youth movement, and I wanted to speak to the youth and get them excited and like fighting for our country and fighting against the evil democrats and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And kind of like doesn't really disavow the Groypers or Nick Fuentes, but really just kind of says, well, this was my reason to be there. That's kind of her logic. And I didn't really know what Nick Fuentes stood for, et cetera. Now,
it's exactly what Trump did over and over again. Do you denounce David Duke? I don't know David Duke. Don't know what he thinks. Do you denounce QAnon? I don't know about it. Don't know. I hear they like me. They want to save the world. Is that bad? I don't know.
Exactly.
Same shit.
Let's just like put brass tacks out here. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene might be that dumb. She sounds that dumb. I mean, I've spent some time listening to her lately. I do not believe that woman has a full set of marbles, and I don't like to make fun of people for that sort of thing, but like, just listen to her. It is very obvious to me that there is a very strong possibility that Marjorie Taylor Greene does not know anything at all about the way the world works.
This is what I mean when we say that she's dumb and she's lacking a full set of marbles. We're not actually talking about mental illness. We have I mean, I'll presume to speak for you here, we have great sympathy for and respect for people who have that struggle in life. We both may or may not have our own issues, with anxiety and depression and things like that. Many millions of people do. That's not what we're saying when we say stuff like that, is that this woman has deranged herself through her ideology. I think that's what we mean.
No, absolutely. And believes, I mean, very silly things. I mean, like the Jewish space lasers and, just like some of her,
the Death Star of David. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A bunch of, but stuff that doesn't like map onto this, like explicitly white nationalist movement in like kind of a straightforward way. She doesn't sound like she's kind of coming from that and then covering for herself. She just sounds like, she sounds like any number, like millions of white women of that particular age in large swaths of the United States talk like this.
That's why this strategy is going to work, because there's millions of these people, and they might not agree about everything. They might have crazy ideas that don't match perfectly, but they all know what they're against. They all know who they hate.
Right. Exactly. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, she may not know exactly what Nick Fuentes stands for. She posed for photos with him and Michelle Malkin. So, but that's a photo op. Who knows? I promise you her staff know, right? And that's, I think, the larger question here, because
and maybe don't go to speak at a conference organized by somebody that you don't really know what their politics are. If somebody asked me to speak at a conference, I'd find out what they thought about shit.
To bend over backwards, to be fair to like a terrible person, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is a piece of shit, like clearly, but to politicians are very often attending some kind of meet and greet, some kind of like cocktail dinner, they're eating shrimp cocktails with some people that like the staffers just sort of make those decisions and kind of move them along. That is sort of a reality of American politics. You are constantly moving around. Every minute of your day is pre-scheduled. Like that, if you are doing this work, that is largely what your day looks like, right? And that's why I say, even if MTG did not know, her fucking staff did. And I guarantee you there are Groypers on her staff who may or may not be telling the full story about who exactly Nick Fuentes is. But this is part of the kind of structure of how the Groyper organization, so this movement, is trying to infiltrate. They're trying to get into not necessarily like the voting, or, you know, not necessarily like a representative position, although they do have that as their long-term goal. But to sort of like control information and control positions around candidates, and to like keep their powder dry and not to say the quiet part loud. That's sort of the nature of it. And so I guarantee you, like, there are a ton of 25-year-old white boys working in, you know, Republican offices at every level of the U.S. government who are Nick Fuentes fans, or who are TRS fans, or who are Richard Spencer fans, or whatever. I promise you that is true. In every single one of those offices, you're going to find one of those guys. It's just the reality of it.
And again, this, or some variation of this, or some version of this is how they do it. This is how they've always done it. Going back to Nazi Germany, one of the untold stories about the Nazi rise to power is that it's always portrayed as like this suddenly the Nazis were in power thing. Yeah, I mean, kind of, but also there was a long process of them building influence and building a profile and stuff like that. They acquired like power in localities and stuff like that, and they did it via. I mean, famously, Hitler had sort of a political alliance with very famous war leaders, conservative, respectable conservative war leaders like General Ludendorff and so on. Now, I'm sure that Ludendorff, appalling person that he was, didn't really fully understand who and what Hitler was. Doesn't fucking matter.
Right, exactly. And none of this is meant to like to detract from the horror of this at all. I'm just trying to be like epistemically clear about what I do and do not believe, or like my kind of level of like certainty on some of these issues, right? Because I feel like a lot of what we try to do here is to sort of like lay out some of these shades of gray, right? So do not take my my try to be fair to Marjorie Taylor Greene as a defense of her in any way. That's just not what's going on here. So
gotcha.
Greene had another controversy, not anything that Greene did, of course, but one of the other speakers at the conference called her out on the stage for kind of being a cuck. And it's this guy Stu Peters. Now he is in his 50s, I believe. He's had a podcast for a while. I never knew about it until a couple of days ago. It is now on my archive list and my to listen list. So I don't know a ton about this guy, but he claims to have been a bounty hunter, sort of tracking down criminals, and talking a lot about, like tracking down illegals and drug smugglers and all this sort of thing. And well, let's just play. This was the controversial bit of Stu Peters' speech.
Okay. In your 50s with a podcast, that's tragic. Being 46 in 4 or 5 months with a podcast, that's fine. Being in your 50s with a podcast, no.
Well, his podcast, just to be clear, now hard for me to we named this podcast when we thought we'd have 200 listeners, and so hard to blame
me. I gave it the name.
Hard to blame another podcast for having a terrible name, but the podcast is entitled Patriotically Correct.
Trips off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Apparently he was kicked off of several platforms, Spotify and I think iTunes or Apple Podcasts and some other stuff a few months ago for something incendiary. He said, again, I've not done the deep dive on Stu Peters. I'll dig around if there's something interesting. There will undoubtedly be a future episode on it. But let's
you got to learn, Stu. There's a very special way to be a right-wing extremist on Spotify. You can do it, but there's a way to do it.
You can do it. You have to be on news radio first. That's the way to do it. And be a UFC color commentator and talk to. Sorry, we're not doing that episode.
No, we're not doing that either.
No, I'm not even getting into that one.
The Congresswoman from Georgia didn't mention it. I will. Child sex trafficking is the #1 business coming across that border every single day, and it is sick. That is disgusting. And nobody is willing to talk about it. None of these people in the media will talk about it. None of these people that we elect and send to Congress or to the United States Senate are talking about it. So you have to ask yourself, are they a part of it?
That's the QAnon moment, by the way. Of course, all the leaders in power are secretly raping children. Yeah, that's just to be clear. In case that didn't come out to you quite as strongly as it might have. That's the quiet part loud of he's a QAnoner. Yeah.
Well, QAnon contains that because it's a fascist movement, and again, this sort of thing, abuse of children by them. It's eternal, always in fascism, always our children. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah.
They basically ignore talking about the border because they only care about milking ratings by getting the latest own on Biden. It's disgusting. Last October, when Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was just here, heard about Chairman Biden offering reparations to illegal immigrants, she complained that Biden was giving money to illegals while snubbing a reparations bill for Black Americans. Congresswoman Greene was embracing race-based reparations to own the libs. Great job, Marge. Disgusting.
Well, I understand, given where she got her start, I understand being disappointed with Marge, for failing on the elites are mucking around with our kids in an organized way front,
Right.
Listen,
and she's actually really aggressive on that. Like, first of all, even within like mainstream culture, the idea that like no one cares about child sex trafficking, is ridiculous. Like, like it's the whole thing of like nobody cares about black crime. Well, that's why we spend like $8 trillion a year on our American criminal justice system, quote unquote. Right, exactly. Yeah. What you mean is the New York Times doesn't have like a black crime section on the front page every day. Like that's what that means. Like, but the actual material realities just do not match the like fundamental like thing that you're saying and that you believe. Right. Anyway, continue.
I was just going to say, the absolute outrage and disgust, that she made a rhetorical point. I mean, far be it from me to defend Marjorie Taylor Greene, certainly not on this point, but I'm sure she wasn't embracing race-based reparations, as he put it. I'm quite certain in my own mind that that's not what she was doing. She was making a rhetorical point, owning the libs, owning Biden. I'm sure, but the disgust and horror at the idea that anybody could have, and even the faintest tolerance for the idea of reparations to Black Americans. There you go.
Okay, and so first of all, the word reparations has this kind of like secret kind of coded language, because like any like funding that goes to like helping African Americans in any sense gets turned into reparations for this. So I don't know the details of exactly what Marjorie Taylor Greene said. She might have said something literally as simple as, well, why doesn't Comrade Biden support, small business loans for African-American families if he's going to claim that Black Lives Matter or something? That would be enough to like cuck on the race issue for these guys. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So what was the result of this? Stu Peters, a speaker at Nick Fuentes' conference, calls out Marjorie Taylor Greene, another speaker at this conference, like an hour and a half later, for being a cuck. And Nicky boy, he had to make a decision. Who do you think he went with, Jack?
I'm betting he went with the big name.
Oh, really? You think he would stoop that low as to support the woman?
Well, look,
Nick Fuentes doesn't like women like speaking in public in general. So the idea that like he would actually support an elected representative, like a woman in a position of power in any sense, that is not what Nick Fuentes believes, right? But also, she very clearly does not believe the open white supremacy that Nick Fuentes does, and certainly the open anti-Semitism, et cetera, et cetera. So. And Stu Peters probably doesn't believe what Marjorie Taylor, what Nick Fuentes believes, at least in so many words either. But yes, you're correct. He absolutely went for the person in the position of power.
He did, right? Okay, I was going to say I gave him credit for being too cynical, but apparently I didn't. So
on his telegram, and I have this here. So Stu Peters apparently spoke to a Daily Beast reporter. I have this article in the show notes. I have a bunch of articles in the show notes, including a tweet thread by Ben Lorber, who kind of viewed the thing live and did like kind of a live tweet thread. It has like a ton of good clips. I didn't want to include all that here, but very informative thread, really kind of worth your time. If you're not gonna do anything else, any kind of further reading, definitely check out that thread. Ben Lorber, friend of the podcast. Let's just put it that way. So apparently Stu Peters spoke to Zach Patriso at the Daily Beast and gave some quotes for an article. And then Nick Fuentes, he had some words to say in his telegram, and I think it's worth reading this. And people liked my Foghorn Leghorn voice, so I'm going to do a little bit of a Nick Fuentes voice here, because he's doing like these days, and this is kind of hard to describe, but he's kind of doing, that like Christian Slater early 90s kind of like staccato delivery, man. That's sort of the way he's speaking on stage. I don't think he's doing that on his show, but he was really kind of pushing into that. You mean that fairly long period in his career where Christian Slater was convinced that the way to stardom was to do a constant Jack Nicholson impression. Right. Yeah. It's the third-rate Jack Nicholson impression, And I kind of like some of Christian Slater's movies in the 80s and 90s. I'm not a fan of Christian Slater here, but it is really funny to see like Nick Fuentes do this. I'm actually not going to do the voice because I can't do it justice, but just imagine this in like Christian Slater in the 80s on a skateboard. Like that's the level.
Okay.
I'll do a little bit of it.
Somehow it feels right imagining Nick Fuentes with his cap on backwards with a skateboard. It just, it does.
They had this thing where they were wearing these like particular brand of glasses for a while, like particular brand of sunglasses. I don't even remember the name of the glasses, but it's like this high-end, $500 pair of sunglasses. And all the Groypers were going to all their events wearing these things. And it's like, what do you look like the biggest dorks in existence, because they're still wearing their like suits, their like 3-piece suits and their red ties. They're like the young Republicans, and they're all wearing these like surfer glasses. It's bizarre.
They really, I'm talking about, again, I won't go into this, but I was talking about this in one of our recent episodes. We were talking about Elijah Schaffer. They're so fucking childish, aren't they? They really are. It's like a playground craze. It used to happen at school where, suddenly everybody would have to have the same bag or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah. They might as well all be wearing like slap bracelets.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. I'll do a little bit of the voice, but if I drop it, then that's because I don't want to. All right. Very disappointing that Stu Peters, a former rapper and criminal, is trying so hard to sabotage a perfect night by running to Zach Patriso at the Daily Beast to attack one of our featured speakers. He was disrespectful to our staff, looked like a slob, and he stormed out of the conference after his speech. And for people who think he was just too hardcore or whatever, he also tried to get me to promise to stop saying the N-word before even agreeing to attend the conference. LOL. Good riddance, loser. He told me there's a slur at the end of this. I'm gonna use it in Jackson. I'll bleep it out, but okay. He told me he thinks the UN is going to invade America and establish communism. He's not even red-pilled on anything. Just another retard boomer. I love it when these people fight. It makes my day every time. Like, how ridiculous is this? Stu Peters didn't want me to say the N-word on my show.
Yeah, that's it. I love that. That's his trump card. It's it's like, ultimately the reason you shouldn't like Stu Peters is because he's a cuck on the N-word. There you go. That's
right. He did actually look like
he
shit
claims to be calling out MTG for being a cuck. Actually, he's the cuck because he tells me not to say.
Yeah, it does make me wonder what MTG says in private, she may very well be like a hardcore racist and just like very good at appearing to be the more subtle kind of racist. I would certainly believe it if I were presented evidence of it. So anyway, that's sort of the two big controversies that came out of this were surrounding Marjorie Taylor Greene. And a couple of other, again, elected representatives, kind of gave, video addresses. And again, a lot of the coverage around this has already kind of discussed them. So I'm just going to kind of move past it and kind of discuss the other elements that I thought were interesting. But it is really important to the brand that, to the America First brand, to Nick Fuentes' Groyper movement, that they do get some level of buy-in from, professional politicians and people with, some level of authority, even if it's kind of a fringe authority within, kind of mainstream right-wing politics. So, again,
yeah.
essential.
And this little snafu with Peters, this is, for snafu from Nick's point of view, this is part of the process of ironing these things out. This is part of the process of coalition building,
Right. Exactly. Other speakers at this thing were Vincent James. He's of the openly white nationalist thing, the Red Elephants. He attended Unite the Right in 2017. He has sort of aligned himself more and more closely with the Groypers and with Nick Fuentes. There might be a full episode on the Red Elephants at some point in the future. I've never really spent that much time on them because it's just kind of boilerplate. I don't know. It's funny that this is just the boilerplate Nazis. Why should I spend my time with that? But
people love those episodes, Daniel.
Yeah, people love the ones where it's like, let's go back and dig into 5 years of this kind of racism and just talk about Vince James for 2 hours. I'm sure. Yes, I could prep that. Maybe we'll do that soon. Anyway. So Wendy Rogers, who's an Arizona state representative, and I believe she's the one who called for building gallows to hang the enemies of our country, which, by the way, means, well, certainly me. You're not within the jurisdiction, but basically everyone who voted for Joe Biden, which was only a handful of people in these people's minds, also, because they
of course, yeah.
Andrew Torba, who is the CEO of Gab. And Andrew Torba is another one that we're probably going to do a full episode on. And I thought, I kind of stopped paying attention to Gab in 2018 or so, because I thought it was on its way down the drain. And I was like, what's this going to matter?
Yeah.
But it's still going strong, and he's still getting his venture capital money. He's still able to put together a service. It is a shitty service, but he is able to kind of put it together and have it be a thing. And, I think he uses a phrase here in this clip.
It's kind of how I always felt about Nick Fuentes, actually, a few years ago. It's like, he'll fizzle out.
Well, remember, we covered, when we first covered him, I covered him alongside James Alsop, because I thought these two guys were sort of at their best together. And then once they separated, they'd both kind of fail, kind of fail upward a little bit, but then just kind of get into irrelevance. Right. And so I just never really spent that much time on them, even after Fuentes sort of got bigger and also joined the right stuff. There was still kind of not a real a reason to sort of put a lot of time into them. I did kind of follow Nick Fuentes off and on for years, and obviously as the Groypers started to kind of become bigger, but he's really starting to look like a force here. And as we get to the end of the episode, I want to kind of pose the question both to Jack and to the audience about whether Nick Fuentes is going to continue to be a force after this or not, with the kind of the Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of incident and some of the kind of larger issues here. So Wendy Rogers comes in, Andrew Torba. Let's play the Andrew Torba clip here, because it just kind of indicates the breadth of the kinds of ideas that are at play in this conference, and also a whole lot more religious talk, but religious talk of a particular kind. And I'm not expecting Jack to pick up on this. And so far, there have not been a lot of people who have picked up on this explicitly, but it's there, and we're gonna highlight it.
We must be the ones who are willing to put in the work to build a Christian future, not only for our children and our children's children, but for Christendom as a whole. Now is the time for us to build. This is a spiritual war. They are targeting our very humanity. This is evidenced by everything that our enemies promote. Their values are inherently anti-human. Abortion, moral decay, sexual degeneracy, the destruction of sovereign nations, and the ethnic cleansing of people, the persecution of everything and anything related to God Almighty, our Creator. Let me make one thing very clear. We must realize that King Jesus is not some hippie Mr. Rogers that our culture makes him out to be. He is oh wait, it gets better. It gets better. He is king of
It gets better, by the way. What does that mean in I don't speak German context? It gets worse.
Yeah.
So
Just reverse it. Yeah.
just to be clear, like let's just our Jesus is not the cuck Jesus, the Fred Rogers Jesus. Oh, by the way, like Fred Rogers would was a bigger man than anyone on that stage, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Fred Rogers personally spoke to Congress and got them to fund public broadcasting for children back in the 70s, when home taping was starting to be a thing. Fred Rogers will be remembered when these people are all buried in dust. It's I'm not even a huge stan of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but to put that it's just such bullshit. Sorry, I just had to call that out. But he's arguing we're not doing the cut Jesus. This is the warrior Jesus here. Listen to his examples of what warrior Jesus is going to do.
He is King of Kings. He reigns. He rules. He flips over the tables in the temple. He scorns the den of vipers. He rebukes the synagogue of Satan. This is the Jesus that we know and worship. This is the Jesus of the scriptures. And this is the Jesus that will lead us out of this mess. Christ is King. 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 Christ is King.
Christ is King again.
Christ is King. Yeah, big chant. Everybody knows to chant it.
It's clearly very, very much a theme of this is the direct outreach to this form of sort of Christian dominionism, that particular type of right-wing authoritarianism. Yeah, I can't help noticing that the chants really, and the cheering and the applause and everything really start up when he starts talking about the synagogue of Satan and the temple, and maybe I'm paranoid, but I sense dog whistles in there somewhere. I don't know.
Do you know the phrase synagogue of Satan? I know I've mentioned it on the show, but it was a few dozen episodes back. It has a very particular meaning. It's explicitly from Christian identity. It is an explicit Christian identity code, which we have discussed Christian identity to some detail, and I'm not prepared to kind of go into the details of it, but it is an openly anti-Semitic religion. It posits that the Jews are there are a couple of different versions of this, but basically that the Jews are racial aliens to white people, that the actual descendants of the Israelites of the Bible were white people, were Northern Europeans, and in particular Britons, although this gets expanded in some versions of it. And that the people who claim to be Jews now and who claim to are actually created by the devil. They're demons. And all through this speech by Torba, he talks about demonic forces in America and et cetera, et cetera. And then towards the end of his speech, he goes to, oh, wait for it, I'm going to give you the red meat now. And then the audience cheers because now whether all of those people know, whether the Groypers kind of use synagogue of Satan whether they know that's Christian identity or not, who knows? But they know when he says synagogue of Satan, he's talking about Jews. They know when he's talking about the moneylenders in the temple, he's talking about Jews. This is very, very explicit, right?
Yes.
And just the fact that he uses that phrase to thundering applause kind of tells you what you need to know here, right? This
very much so. Yeah. Doesn't really require much unpacking.
Right,
I will just say in passing, you don't know anything, Andrew Torba. None of you people know fuck all. The reason Jesus is pissed off about the money changes in the temple is because Jesus was an observant, believing, practicing Jew. He is pissed that they are bringing the unclean, the non-sacred, the profane, the image of the emperor into the Jewish temple. That's what he's pissed about. So fuck off.
Right. And they will interpret that in kind of various ways. But I mean, the idea of renouncing earthly power. Yeah, and it's funny, God, this is something that we could get into in so much detail. But they also talk about like renouncing earthly power, renouncing kind of earthly possessions, because in our hearts, in the glory of God, we will one day, kind of be in heaven, and we will, rule eternally, etc. And that Christ will, we will be instruments for Christ, and etc., etc. But ultimately, the Christian faith is not, God, complicated, but like it is not a religion of read in context, it is not a religion of war. Now, it has been used to justify war, obviously, and I'm an atheist. I'm not here to stand for this, but the reason that people kind of refer to the Fred Rogers Jesus is because that is, Jesus was, like in modern terms, he's a anarchist revolutionary trying to overturn the state by changing people's values from within into something that is like spiritually focused and focused on like feeding each other and helping the needy and those sorts of things. And this is not anything like what these people have any understanding of, whenever these people, and this goes for like the entire like right wing, whenever they start talking about like, well, we're going to go out and we're going to feed people or give people jobs training, or we're going to help people do mutual aid. They don't use the term mutual aid, but whenever they start talking about it, it's a photo op that they do so that they can look like nice people to gain mainstream political power. They have no understanding of what like an actual, quote unquote, muscular Christianity looks like, and
No.
I'm not here to kind of talk the theology or, I'm not a Christian, but, so I don't want to offend anybody with that, but like, I don't think that the people in this audience are going to argue with me too hard on that. Right.
No, they're using Christ and Christianity as shorthands to express their interests and their identity and their cultural power. That's all. But they're profoundly ignorant. Jesus, the best we can tell, from textual analysis and historical analysis, the best we can tell, Jesus was like, the revolution's coming, and the rich are all going to fucking burn, and the poor are going to rule the world. The last should be first, etc. And he viewed that entirely through. Well, he was. In his context, he was one of the people they hate, one of the people they fantasize, about as these great demons, because he wanted to upend the whole thing. He wanted to upend the hierarchy, and he understood that explicitly through his Judaism as well, because he was an apocalyptic Jewish prophet, an anti-imperialist apocalyptic Jewish prophet.
Seth Wispeley, who was one of the plaintiffs in the Science v. Kessler case, who is a minister, once tweeted, "Jesus is Antifa," and
it's closer.
There's something that's definitely closer to there are some historical things you could kind of quibble with there, but like the spirit is strong, even if the flesh is weak.
if the historical Jesus was on Twitter, he'd get cancelled pretty quick by the left, but with some justice probably,
right? Yeah, sure.
Thousands of fucking years ago,
Right, but, no. Anyway, so moving forward,
yes.
I think it's worth, and this is just, this is one of those moments where I do have to apologize, because I'm going to give you little clips of something that I cannot bother, that I do not have the time to get into, because I'm going to now play you. The structure of the thing kind of starts like, if you're a white nationalist, if you're a Groyper in this audience, you get Nick comes out, he gives his good kind of rabble-rousing speech. MTG, the big star of the show, second person to come up. Vincent James, buddy we know from all these podcasts, he attended Charlottesville. One of us comes out, gives a rousing speech. We didn't play any of that because I just want to save Vincent James for another thing. Stu Peters, despite the fact that he's clearly not all there in his speech, it's a rousing speech. He knows he's talking about, immigrant crime, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start to get
they were digging it.
Yeah. Wendy Rogers comes in. She does she's the Arizona State rep. And she, these people come in with like kind of 3-minute clips. And it's kind of a, I'm kind of making the point that like the evening starts very strong in terms of, giving kind of red meat to the people in the audience. And then Torba talks, and he does the Synagogue of Satan thing. Great, more red meat. Paul Gosar, the other kind of big hero, who's a representative who is very friendly with Nick Fuentes. And again, there's probably a whole episode about Paul Gosar. I'm not including any of that because
the dentist.
Yeah, it's the Ghost Star thing is, the tape segments are mostly just like pretty boilerplate from these people, right? It's just kind of standard, like, sorry I can't be there, but like I show you my support and go and put America first. It's like, okay, that's the thing. And then Jesse Lee Peterson shows up, and then after Jesse Lee Peterson, they play a brief thing of Janice McGeehan, who is a Idaho lieutenant governor, who there's some technical problems where like the audio fades out and they have to start the video again. And then it looks like they filmed like an intro to a second video, but some people are interpreting it as like, maybe that's like a rehearsal that just sort of got thrown into the mix. So like they start having like serious technical problems, and it's just kind of this rambling bit of nothing. And then Joe Arpaio comes up, and then Nick comes in to like wrap up the evening. Now, the thing with Jesse Lee Peterson and Joe Arpaio is the guests were asked to speak for like 15 to 20 minutes. And I didn't put like a full timer on this. I meant to actually time the exact amounts, but I just didn't have time to prep this episode. Each of these men speak for at least 45 minutes. So, and I want to give you...
Wow, listening to Joe Arpaio speak for 45 minutes.
And
what an experience.
You heard the cold open, like the level of energy he had.
Yeah,
that's like the highlight of his fucking speech, man. Like that is.
I was going to say he sounded pretty jazzed there. And...
Yeah. It's also like it is at this point. Like the evening starts at 9 p.m., so it's got to be like midnight at this point, right? Like even like it's late, right? So, and some of us are night out, some of us are not. I've been on a more like daytime schedule. I get to like 10:30 and my brain is just kind of like mush. I would not want to speak in public, at that time. And I'm not like 85 billion years old and the most famous racist in America. But I digress, because I've got to tell you about Jesse Lee Peterson. All right.
Yeah.
Now, people seem to like not know what to do with this guy, and I have been reticent to really do anything seriously with him because, and it's going to become clear why once you kind of hear him talk. But he is an African-American man. He's been a pastor for decades. He is an open white nationalist, but he's a black man.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on. He is, I believe, the only African-American person to ever appear on The Daily Show. I mean, I'm 99.9% sure that is correct. He goes on the Political Cesspool. He is a regular guest on the Political Cesspool. He has his own radio show. He has his own like kind of network of podcasts. Where the money comes from, I have no idea who is actually funding this guy and who is listening to this. Like, because I'm about to play you. This is not like the worst clip I could find. This is not like the nicest. This is just, I just kind of picked a minute and a half or so to give you a sense of what listening to Jesse Lee Peterson sounds like. And imagine this for 45 minutes after you just got to hear, Andrew Torba talk about the synagogue of Satan if you're a white nationalist. All right, so let's just do this here.
It is wrong, and they can get away with it because you're afraid. You're afraid to say, no, I'm not a racist. There's no such thing as racism. I've been telling white people for years, when they started doing the knockout games, when they start calling you racist, y'all need to speak up here, because all you're doing is bringing the worst out of your enemy. When you don't stand up for yourself, you encourage people to pounce on you. I don't care if it's relationships or what. You got to stand up. I see women all the time now smacking men at the airport. Everybody at the airport is crowded. And the husband says something to her, and she smack him. Or she curse him out. And he just sit there and look like a dummy. If you hit me, you're going down. I don't care who you are. When I was growing up, and my little female cousins or my sisters, I have a truckload of sisters, I like 8 or 9, however many. And they used to try to hit me, and I would smack them back, and they would go crying to grandma, why did you hit me? They call me Punchy, right? Punchy hit me. And my grandmother asked, did you hit him? Yeah, well, he deserved to knock you down.
Who wants to listen to 45 minutes of that?
I was going to say, why would anybody call him punchy? I can't even. Holy fuck!
Yeah, it is like that. That is again that like playing that clip. You notice how he jumps around from topic to topic, and he's not really speaking to the microphone. He's they have audio issues all through the thing, by the way, and it's pretty clearly some of these people do not know how to speak in public. Jesse Lee Peterson has been like a professional like radio broadcaster for like years and years. I
think my favorite bit was when he wasn't sure how many sisters he's got. I love that.
8 or 9 sisters, and I mean,
8 or 9, something like that.
The reason that he gets like the support that he does is because like he will actually say like the white men built this country, and I grew up in the Jim Crow South, and it was better back then because we didn't have this fatherlessness. And I'm an alpha male now. I used to be a beta male, but now I'm an alpha male because I know how to like tell women who's boss, and I take control of my household. And like he spouts all the same kind of like white nationalist talking points, maybe with some of the like most hard edges kind of filed off of it. Literally at one point, he talks about like, well, I was a kid, I had to go out and pick cotton one day, and it's like, oh yeah, this is nice, I like picking cotton. Yeah, this is a lot better than the other stuff. And I mean, it's very, very much like he feeds into all of the talking points that these people have. And also like look, this is the difficult thing, because I hate to like, this is another person who is very clearly the more you listen to him, not the sharpest knife in the drawer, right? He leans, white nationalists like him because he kind of matches the stereotype that they believe that all black people are.
I was going to say, yeah.
It's
not just that he's a member of that group who's prepared to say the things that they think about that group. It's also that they think he looks like their idea of that group.
Exactly. It is very common among white nationalists that they actually like, some of the, whenever there's the Boondocks is sort of like a like kind of a touching point for some of them. And that there's a character named Uncle Rufus who is supposed to be sort of the black racist, you kids to pull your pants up kind of thing, who will use the N-word in the show like many times. And this is like a favorite character. Like, it's like, no, this is what black people actually like. And so we actually think that show is telling truths about the community, et cetera, et cetera. And I am not trying to lean into this. I am not trying to justify any of this. I don't have any problem with, Jesse Lee Peterson's aspect or affect. If he, like, obviously this is not about that. This is about like, why does he get to be the person who gets to like stand on the stage? Why is he the one African-American person, the one black person on the stage at AFPAC?
Yeah.
It's because he not only says what they believe, but he looks like what they think he should look like. And, and
it's, I don't know how conscious or sincere it is, or how much it's just who he is or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, we mentioned, but this is the thing, we mentioned Milo earlier. This was Milo's grift until it kind of flew apart for him, which was that he was not only a gay guy who was prepared to say the stuff that they like about politics in general, but also about gay people. But he also, in Milo's case, very consciously and deliberately played into stereotypes about gay men.
And like, there's no, I have zero problem with the gay man taking miles of black cock if that's, let's, go do you, be safe, and enjoy yourself. But the way that Milo played it off as, well, I'm the edgy one and I get to say these things, and I'm the person who gets to kind of be this person because of that. And this is
it wasn't that really so much as just his affect for loads of the time was really, pardon me, but it was really like queer minstrelsy. It was really he was really laying it on with a trowel, like the bitchy queen stereotype thing. He was he was doing that very consciously, right? And it's very much a defense mechanism. And so I think Jesse Lee Peterson is completely authentic to who he is. I see no evidence that there's any kind of level of calculation here. But
Yeah, I know this is a complicated subject matter, and I do apologize if I've stepped on any
Me too.
Any taboos there, because this gets into like some complicated stuff, and there's a reason I have not talked about Jesse Lee Peterson on this podcast before, despite the fact I'm actually fairly interested in his kind of various appearances, and he does sometimes, I don't know, there is a place for him on this podcast, but it is very difficult to talk about that in any kind of like concrete way without
it's going to take some picking through that,
right? Exactly. But anyway, big rambling speech by Jesse Lee Peterson. Who, again, most people, or even people who follow this stuff, don't necessarily know who Jesse Lee Peterson is, which I think is interesting, because I've known him for a few years now, at least getting kind of on the outskirts. Although I've never followed his show, although I'm about to add it to my archive. Got to get a new hard drive again, but it's gonna happen. And then Joe Arpaio comes on and does the same fucking thing. So hour and a half of giant rambling speeches. Let's give you a little bit more Joe Arpaio. Just this amuses me for a whole lot of reasons.
And then I look back at something. I'm responsible for 250,000 illegal immigrants in this country here illegally with fake government document. Happens to be a driver's license, Social Security. And I raided a lot of businesses. So I didn't become the popular guy with Mexican business. I raided everybody. I'm an equal opportunity guy anyway. I lock everybody up. So I'm thinking, well, how did these 250,000 get arrested, charged, and deported? And we got a president with a fake government document, he gets a pass. So where's the fairness in the criminal justice? There is no fairness. They want to go after you, they go after you. They've been going after Trump for all these years, and they're still after him. And you know about the Capitol and all that other stuff, what's going on. So it's not fair. There's something wrong with our country today. We're going down the tube. But we'll survive. Greatest country in the world, we will survive.
Well, you know what's going on with the Capitol.
No, I don't know what's happening here with the yeah.
He even does the "I'm an equal opportunities offender" thing.
He literally does this extended thing about the pink underwear, like. If you know about Joe Arpaio, one of the things that he did was he forced inmates in his jail to wear pink underwear because it's like it emasculates these people, and it's like one of the things that he did. He's bragging about this, but he has a pair of the pink underwear on the lectern with him. He's literally like holding it up and going like, "We sell this, by the way. I'm not trying to sell this underwear, but we do sell it all over the world now. We get it." We have to get it from Italy. He goes on an extended rant about how he has to like a source from Italy for some. I don't like.
What, they're not made in America? You traitor, Joe.
He's apparently like hyping his new book. I mean, it's again like it's so. There's no speech. There,
I want to believe that the book is like just taken straight from dictation, and that it's written like he talks. He was then I saw the thing, and the thing, complete with loads of ellipses and stuff like that. That's how the book should.
And again, far be it from me to like criticize a 70-year-old man or however old Joe Arpaio is for having imperfect, microphone presence. Certainly I can be criticized for certain things. Like, let's just be clear about that. I'm not a radio professional, but at least I have like a clear topic, and I have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah. And you get there no matter what I do to try to stop you.
Well, we try. Sometimes we jump around a little bit. It's okay, but there's an art to actually talking to people. And at one point he literally says like, "I'm only going to talk for like 2 hours here." "Oh, I can't feel. They told me." And it's like he's doing this like old man, like grandpa jokes in front of this crowd. And I get it. You're talking to a bunch of 20-year-olds or whatever, like, that's the thing. But it's like, it's such this they literally are like, you can sense them like getting out the cane to like drag him off stage, and he's sitting there going like,
yeah, the hook appearing from the side of the.
I'll be done in a minute. Just gotta do another like just gotta talk a little bit longer. And then he talks for another like 10, 15 minutes. It's yeah. And
it's great. It's like you go to a concert, and all the current, I don't know the current bands, but all the big current bands, they do a 5-minute set each, and then on comes the surviving members of Motley Crue or whatever, and they do an hour and a half.
They do an hour and a half of like lackadaisical covers of their best material. Yeah. Not even like let's play the hit song, but like to talk ramblingly for 15 minutes about, don't you remember how great the old song is? Yeah. Exactly. So I got 2 more clips here. And the last one is the one that everybody knows about. But we're going to play it here anyway, just for completion. But we're probably going to dip into this a couple of times, but this is sort of Nick Fuentes wrapping up, right? Because Nick Fuentes begins the thing and then he ends the thing. And the ending is really like he's trying to bring the energy of the room back up there. And he's saying some shit. So let's just get into this.
And I look at the political conversation today, and it wouldn't be the same without him. But you know what?
He's talking about Jared Taylor, who was in the audience at this thing, which I've said a couple of times, but just to be clear, he's referring to Jared Taylor, the founder of American Renaissance.
People these days, they say some of the things that he says now, even on Fox News and in popular circles. But show me somebody who was saying those things when it was not popular. Show me somebody that was standing up and speaking the truth when nobody else was. Jared Taylor did that for 30 years, and we acknowledge and we remember that, and we honor his legacy here tonight. Thank you for being here. It is an honor. I also want to give a special shout out because I haven't spoken with you since earlier tonight. It feels like this conference has gone on for my entire life with these speeches. We tell them 15, 20 minutes, and I don't know what's going on with that. But you know what? But it's good. We enjoy the content.
I wonder who's not getting invited to AFPAC 4, by the way. All right, continue.
It did sound, he'll hate this comparison, but he sounded very, very Jerry Seinfeld there for a minute.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But do you get
what? But it's good. It's okay.
Do you get the Christian Slater thing I mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And it's even more clear when you're like, because you're just listening to his audio, but like if you look at his face, he even does like the squinty eyes sort of deal. It was a real moment for me.
Enjoyed, right? I mean, it's. But I want to once again reiterate a special thank you. We are so grateful for Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene for joining us here earlier tonight. Can we get another round of applause? EbTG. And you know what I like about Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene? She is a fighter. She's in there. She is in there, in the system, making change. And I have to say this. Any moron can go up and say, oh, we're going to kill them, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. That's easy.
Oh, what you mean like you did outside the Capitol on January 6th?
It is easy to complain. Anybody can do that. But to get in there in Congress, in the belly of the beast, and to fight in the front lines, I respect that any day of the week. God bless Marjorie Taylor Greene.
So the explicit praise of Marjorie Taylor Greene. He knows who the big star is here. And the big star is not him in this moment, right? It's not Nick Fuentes' event. It is obviously his event. It is obviously created by him, putting his ideology out there. But he knows who the big star is. He knows whose ass he has to kiss in this moment, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's and it is, there is a uniting the right kind of element here, where he's trying to bring sort of the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the QAnon people and the Jesse Lee Petersons, who's like whoever, but with the Jared Taylors, he's trying to sort of merge this whole thing of like this sort of respectable white nationalism, and he's trying to like put that energy into this kind of larger reactionary movement, which finds itself on the outside of the kind of respectable conservative banner.
But has its foot in the door.
But has its foot in the door, exactly, and much more so than it did a few years ago. And this is Nick Fuentes is winning here, I think. Well, this is it. It's always had its foot on the door. It kind of has its knee in now, Right. Like he is making progress in this sense. He is kind of bringing more of his ideology into these kinds of spaces, and that's largely due to his sort of cultural influence with a particular kind of young white man on the internet. That's he has worked very hard for this. Like you cannot claim he's a slacker on this. He has put thousands and thousands of hours into being this person. He is exactly the person that he appears to be ultimately. And
very, very obviously, this is the whole point of the exercise, and in many respects, despite the bumps in the road that we've talked about, very successful. The point of the exercise is to slowly, bit by bit, construct and negotiate some sort of coalition, to do that syncretic thing that fascism always does. Like across significant ideological differences. Jared Taylor, of course, famously is not, or claims not to be, anti-Semitic.
Then again, he's constantly making alliances with people from the Institute for Historical Review, which are open Holocaust deniers. But there's always been that kind of, we covered this in our American Renaissance episode, there's always been that sort of like, but like that is kind of the one thing that people think Jared Taylor is a cuck, because he is not openly anti-Semitic, and he has never really kind of talked about that subject. His statement is always, well, they look white to me, but Nick Fuentes will openly embrace someone like Jared Taylor, and Jared Taylor Jared Taylor asked Nick Fuentes to speak at an Amarin conference a few years ago. So that's kind of one of Nick Fuentes' kind of big moments, is kind of talking about like the Zoomer generation, what they're going to do to kind of spread the Amarin message. This is a very explicit strategy, and
and the response to Stu Peters was kind of like, shut up, dude, you're spoiling it.
Right, exactly. And it's very like this is something I was thinking about, is like, well, why bring on Joe Arpaio and Jesse Lee Peterson and some of these other figures to give rambling, boring speeches to this crowd? Like, what's the point? This is a paying audience. Like it costs $200 to get into this event, and there were, a number of, like VIP passes that went for, I think the highest one was like $10,000. And you got, X number of passes and, a dinner with Nick Fuentes and, all this kind of sort of thing. So, like this is a big, there's real money being spent here. And again, what is the point of this? To get a bunch of like internet groypers to listen to these kinds of speeches. Like, I get why they want to listen to Andrew Torber's speech. I get why they want to listen to, Vincent James. I get a lot of the other stuff. But what's the point in kind of bringing these representatives in? What's the point of bringing these kind of stalwarts of, kind of more traditional CPAC kind of politics? And partly that's, I think, a whitewashing issue. That's obscuring the real nature of that. This is an openly white nationalist or white supremacist conference, and I think that's partly. I think the major thing is to keep getting that foot in the door. You say we gave Joe Arpaio a speak point, and he has, Black and Mexican grandchildren. That was actually something he said on the stage and got like boos. By the way, interesting moment there. But I think that's the logic. That's what is going on here in terms of why structure a conference this way, because it's sort of, it's not really serving anybody's needs perfectly. It's not kind of being a traditional conservative conference, but it's also not really kind of a white nationalist alt-right conference. It's kind of a lot of things at once that are sort of happening under the same banner. But I think the whole point is to sort of build this coalition and to build it by, being public about it and to always have this thing you can point to and to have that kind of like, this kind of like messaging, this kind of optics is always like super important to someone like Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, it reads to me more like a kind of social process, like the process of negotiating. It's almost like diplomacy. It's like, the point is less what is actually said and still less what is actually agreed upon by everybody. They're not hammering out a unified program or anything. The point is to get them all there in the same place under the same roof, and to make the point that we can coalesce and pull in the same direction on the stuff that we all agree on.
Exactly. And, there's a reason that he's been kind of buddying up to Alex Jones, and sort of he's appeared on InfoWars a couple of times. And he did some live events, at least one live event with Alex Jones, and completely owned Alex Jones in terms of like actually having a facility with a microphone and actually being able to talk to an audience. That's probably because Alex Jones was very, very drunk, but like Nick Fuentes knows how to work a crowd, in those kinds of moments. There's a great episode of Knowledge Fight. I'll see if I can dig it up and I'll put it in the show notes. Oh wait, aren't we enemies now with Knowledge Fight? I thought. I think there's some overlap in audiences. I think it's fine. Highly recommend Knowledge Fight. It's a great show.
It's fantastic. We love Knowledge Fight.
Yeah, exactly. But there was one incident, and this is the thing that really, got the headlines here. And I think it's worth discussing here at the end of the episode. I was going to kind of put it towards the beginning, but we're doing it at the end. So a little reward for the people who listen all the way to the end.
The United States government has become the great Satan that many have called it. What even is our main export? We have our embassies and consulates all across the world. They wave the flag of what? Transsexuals, Black Lives Matter, the gay pride flag. Being an American used to mean something, and now it means all this crap. And it's a shame. You take a look at China. I hear Fox News and conservatives talk all the time about the Chi-Coms, Chinese social credit system. Have you taken a look at what Google and Facebook are trying to do? Social credit system. And now they're going on about Russia and Vladimir Putin is Hitler. And they say that's not a good thing. And I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. But what other way is there to say it? Of course we know that's a terrible comparison. But they talk about Vladimir Putin and his treatment of the dissidents and of Alexei Navalny and all these. The United States has no moral authority after what they've done to Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Alex Jones, Laurel Loomer, and Nick Fuentes, am I right?
Oh God, where do you even start?
So first of all, something that we didn't quite get to in the Joe Arpaio thing was, he's talking about like the injustice of like the Justice Department going after Donald Trump and going after like him personally for like civil rights abuses, etc., and for the Russiagate stuff, and like if anyone knows about criminal justice and the flaws, Joe Arpaio knows, because he's literally like talking in that clip about, going after hundreds of thousands of quote unquote illegals for documents, for like forged documents, which they used to cross the border or to gain employment once they're across the border. And then like using those forged documents as the legal mechanism of like jailing them and putting them into like horrifying conditions. Right. That's perfectly fine because those people are illegals. But, Barack Obama did not fake his birth certificate. But, the logic is Barack Obama is too powerful. He faked his birth certificate. His documents were bad. And, that's something we're not allowed to even talk about because he's wealthy and powerful. and he's a Democrat.
So that, sorry, just to check, that thing that Arpaio said in that clip was about the president with the fake document. That was a reference. Yeah, fake, but okay, I assumed it was because Arpaio is okay.
Yeah, no, he was one of the early people on that. Also, Donald Trump, obviously.
It's Donald Trump's start, birtherism. Yeah,
and so this idea that like the criminal justice system is coming after Joe Arpaio and Donald Trump specifically for being brave truth tellers, and that they are being unfairly treated by Joe fucking Arpaio making this claim. I mean, I'm just asking, Joe Arpaio, he was cited for contempt of court. Did he have to spend any time in pink underwear in 103-degree Arizona heat? No, I'm guessing not. But then Nick Fuentes is comparing the crushing of dissidents in Russia and saying, who's treated worse? Those people are me, because I don't have a Twitter account anymore. Again, the way that these people constantly refer to like their persecution by, Google, by Twitter, by Facebook, by, financial processors, and then compare that to actual state repression and completely ignore like the actual workings of the criminal justice system. It never ceases to fascinate me in just the way that is, it almost feels like it has to be deliberate, but it's not. They actually believe this. They actually believe it. And that's why they're fascists, So
I agree. I really think that this just boundless self-pity is just integral, isn't it, to this politics?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the conversation, just to kind of wrap up here, the conversation around this, like, he accidentally dropped Hitler's name and said something nice about him at the end of the night. Now that's going to look real bad for him. This sort of the consensus that I'm seeing from, bright people who I respect,
that's him over.
I think first of all, he's, anybody who's been paying attention knows this is who this guy is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how often we explain this to people, it seems to just never stick in the consciousness. And I think that's the point of what he's doing now, is to sort of surround himself with enough squid ink so that he doesn't have to so he's never like called out. He never has to answer for that ultimately, even though he's very deliberate about what he does. If you pay any kind of attention at all, it's very obvious who this person is and what he believes. And the dropping Hitler thing, like, hey, I think it's deliberate. Like, he was feeding red meat to his audience there.
Yeah,
that's also getting headlines. That's what he does.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I'm sure that wasn't a slip. I'm sure that was calculated, because as you say, he is surrounding himself with squid ink, but it's a dual strategy, because you do that to give yourself plausible deniability, but you also start to feed the red meat out there a bit at a time. You start to say it a bit at a time. You dip your toe in a bit at a time, and every time you do it, the same people go, "Oh, well, there you go, there it is. That's him over." But he's not over. He carries on, and then you do it a bit more. It's exactly what Trump did. It's exactly what Trump did. Every time Trump said something, it was like, "Oh, that's his candidacy over," and no, it wasn't. And then he said something worse.
And then that's just the SPLC and the ADL and the Antifa and the Democrats, and the liberals, and the New York Times canceling me because they're just saying these terrible things that aren't true about me. Look, I said it was a bad comparison. And like, if you quote that sentence in text, like he says, "No, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That's a terrible comparison." And, it would be easy to read that and say, well, look, he said it's, this is like the Sam Harris thing, well, he said it was a terrible comparison. And so I think we should really just take him in good faith,
what the woke extremists are failing to point out to you is that Nick Fuentes actually did say that it was a terrible comparison.
His last name is Fuentes. He has some Mexican heritage.
Logically, how can he be a white supremacist? Really, it's inane.
He claims to be 2% black, and I just, a man who is even 2% black just clearly can't hold a real racial animus in his heart. Oh God, I really want Sam Harris to have to talk about Nick Fuentes one day. it would be the most delightful thing ever. Ina and I would talk for hours. It would be amazing.
Well, I think the dialectical process is going there. I think you'll probably be on the Sam Harris show one of these days. What is it called? The Brainy Think Show, Brain Think Show, or something? I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah. One of the things that Joe Arpaio says is that one of the people in this room might be president one day, and I have a lot of respect for this young man, this 23-year-old man who, he's trying to do a clever reference to Nick Fuentes, but like he all but says, I think Nick Fuentes is going to be president one day. And isn't that a terrifying image? The one hope is that we have 12 years before he's eligible. So
there'll be a year where the Republican field of candidates, is like Nick Fuentes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kyle Rittenhouse, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, that's where we're going. Yeah. And then the Democrats will put up, Alexandria Pelosi or whatever. It's we live in hell. But anyway, thanks for listening. That's the end of the pod.
That's it. That's the big finale. Okay, thanks everybody. That was episode 104. If you like the show, you know what to do. And we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
That was I Don't Speak German. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show or found it useful, please spread the word. If you want to contact me, I'm @_Jack_Graham_. Daniel is @Daniel E. Harper, and the show's Twitter is @IDSGpod. If you want to help us make the show and stay 100% editorially independent, we both have Patreons. I Don't Speak German is hosted at idon'tspeakgerman.libsyn.com, and we're also on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and we show up in all podcast apps. This show is associated with Eruditorum Press, where you can find more details about it. The music was by Loon the Band.